Hello and welcome to the EuroSTAR Online Software Testing Summit. Our topic today is Emerging Trends in Testing, Conclusions from the 2013-2014 World Quality Report. I am Michael Cooper with HP Software and I'm joined by Makarand Teje, Senior Vice President of Applications with Capgemini, who is one of the primary co-authors of the World Quality Report this year. Hello, Mac. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Mike, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. Really happy to be here.
This is a special summit, and it's exciting to talk about the World Quality Report. It just came out last week, and this will probably be one of the first web events talking about the World Quality Report, which is made by Capgemini, Teje, and HP Software. So we have a packed agenda today, and we're going to, first of all, tell you a little bit about the World Quality Report, and it'll be more of an interactive discussion. We're going to dig into some of the key findings and trends and review some of the key research highlights. And we're also going to discuss some of the recommendations and findings of the World Quality Report. So, Mac, this is the 5th edition of the World Quality Report, and I've been reading it cover to cover since 2009, but for those of whom are not as familiar with the World Quality Report, can you tell us about the study and what was the catalyst for creating the report?
Absolutely, Mike. And first of all, everyone, Capgemini, HP, and Teje is a very strategic relationship, the way we look at it, from the software licenses, the services, and the solutions that we really bring to the market. And that kind of leads a segue in terms of what we thought about 5 years back. And we realized that software quality or the testing of software applications is taking more and more business importance. And we wanted to take more objective view, which is not region specific, and would be able to give sufficient insights for the C-level officers, directors, and vice presidents in terms of taking decisions related to allocating budgets, what kind of organizations do they want to set up, and so on and so forth. So in the 5th edition, what you're going to see is a very in-depth study which covers every sector possible as well as every region possible. And I'm going to talk a little bit more as we get into the depth, Mike.
Well, super. Yeah, I noticed that the participants from the World Quality Report are really from all over the world, and given that this is a European conference, I think it's interesting to note that nearly 60% comes from Europe, Southern Europe, Western Europe, the Nordics, Eastern Europe, and even UK and Ireland. With so many in Europe, is that because of the European roots of Capgemini, or just because of how the research was done, or what?
Well, actually, we wanted to make sure that every region or that every major market is covered, Mike, and that's sort of representative of what we see here. A bit more background in terms of the structure and the way this is carried out. We firmly believe that this is a fundamental primary research. That means we are going to about 1,500 respondents, and we are asking them about 42 some multiple choice questions, and some of them are open-ended questions in terms of where is the state of software quality. And the analysis of that interview is what is being presented in the slides, as well as participants, when they get to read the report, they will get to hear what those 1,500 respondents are really saying. So coming back to your question in terms of Europe, it is really very well represented in terms of number of participants, but overall we wanted to also make sure that all the 25 countries where Capgemini, Teje, and HP have a joint footprint, we are making sure that we have something taking back to them for the market insight for their decision making. And that's really the reason what you see is it's so well spread out, Mike.
Well, definitely. And not only is it spread out regionally, but also it seems that you've covered quite a few industries and different roles from the QA, from the executive, the CIOs, to the QA testing and managers.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And if you notice, there are about 510 CIOs we have spoken to. And one of the important insights here is that where quality of the software testing really comes from, quality is become a CIO issue, and that's really becoming evident from the number of respondents we talk to. Also, if you look at the sector, banking financial services represented approximately 26%, public sector about 18%, and telecom, media, entertainment about 17%. So we have, on one hand, a very good diversity in terms of the roles, titles of the people whom we are talking to. Second, the industry representation they really come from is possibly from every sector.
Great. Well, let's dig into the findings a little bit more, and I could vouch for the fact that it is a comprehensive interview. Before I joined HP Software, I actually reported to the CIO of a major telecom, and I was a interviewee, if you will, and I was quite impressed, and that's why I'm so invested in really understanding the trends. And honestly, I think they're spot on after reading all 64 pages of the report this year. So let's dig into the findings. Why don't you walk us through the findings one by one, and we'll have a discussion about it.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the first important finding here is related to the structure. And we asked the question as to where do you see the trend? Are organizations setting up more business unit-wise testing organizations, or there is some theme emerging to really centralize that? And what we are noticing here is a significant percentage over last year responded saying that they are going to drive more and more centralization. And that is something which we will talk a little bit more. Now the second one is important aspect is from IT budget. And we asked the question everyone as to, are you spending more money, more dollars, more euros in terms of software quality? And their response was very interesting here. And we analyzed this in the perspective of overall IT budget. And to quote a number, if you take for any analyst report which is publicly available, we'll find that over 12 to 13, 13 to 14, the prediction is that the IT budgets overall are going to go between 2 to 3%. But what we found in this is that the testing budget, or the budget that is allocated for software quality, is increasing between 5 to 6% every year, which means that there is going to be the higher allocation for software quality as a part of total budget, even if the budgets are not really increasing at that pace, and which is very, again, a very important finding. The third one is we wanted to really talk a bit more about testing used to be more of a function which will come after development and something which teams will try to put together a strategy before the code is going on production. So as we always believed in that there is a significant awareness now about the left shift, which means how early test organizations need to be created, how early it is important for them to really start talking into requirement definition cycle, and how important it is in terms of overall defect reduction. And no surprises here. We found that wherever there is a testing engagement later in terms of the cycle, that does not really help in terms of getting quality code, which means the earlier you start, the more and more shift left in the software development life cycle. You have a better quality and you have lesser defect really going into the production. Again, no surprises, but that's an important trend which will continue even the further years.
Yeah, Mac, let me just mention on that topic. I was recently at a retail customer of HP, large IT shop, and they not only talked about the shift left, but the trend to shifting up more towards business metrics as well. And I think we'll cover that as well, right?
Absolutely. And to that point, Mike, measuring number of defects is important, but it is equally important now, or even more important, to translate that in terms of business metrics, or how is it really impacting my business.
Absolutely.
So, and how do you really relate that to overall quality index? And these two things are really emerging as a part of the report.
And in terms of mobile testing, why don't you tell us a little bit about the challenges there and the findings?
Yeah, no surprises here. And it's interesting that if you look at the couple of years back, we used to deploy the enterprise transformation software, and that used to take a couple of years to deploy. And it was a norm to really see once a year or 2 releases in a year. In the mobile testing world, we are increasingly feeling the pressure of time to market. That means expectations are now in months or sometimes in days. So what organizations are coming back is that they are finding that they need standardized processes, number one. Second, they are really looking for access to devices, because if you want to test something which is on a 4 or 5 different types of platform, you need to have a test device which can simulate an environment. And the third most important thing is the expertise which we can marry the first two is becoming more and more scarce.
True.
So mobile testing is again going to grow, and they're going to demand consistency, standardization of environment, access to devices, as well as more expertise around leveraging all the three.
True. Yeah, I remember one that Google came out with the Android phone, and actually T-Mobile, where I was running QA, we had to test it, and we were pioneers. We had to figure it out, and it took a while to find good partners to help us with that, and the tools. It took a few years to come together. Now the tools are okay, but there's still this need to develop a standard methodology and a way of doing this. And you mentioned frequency of releases. It's unbelievable. In some cases, some content releases will happen even twice a day. So the way that we did things in the past has to change. So let's look at some more findings, and we'll discuss it. We'll discuss the other ones as well. Let's talk about cloud adoption.
Absolutely. And this is an interesting finding. All of our readers will find that if you look at the cloud adoption over the last couple of years, it is sort of saturating a bit. And the reason being, the enterprise users are really taking a stock as to making sure that is cloud ready for really prime time in terms of really moving the legacy applications. And what we are finding here is they still prefer more private environment in terms of legacy, but they are willing to experiment with the cloud in terms of some of their front office environments. And the reason for slower adoption again is more to do with the cloud maturity rather than the testing maturity, and the continued concerns related to security and performance. So again, no surprises here. What we are seeing is a slower adoption. And another way to really look at it from what users are telling us is possibly cloud has now reached that sort of a peak of a hype cycle, and after that everybody is going to be really adopting, making on a business case. More adoption in front office, more gradual adoption in terms of the legacy environments. That's what we are really seeing here.
It's interesting, Mac. Cloud means different things to different people, and obviously there's test environments in the cloud, and I know some companies are using that. But then there's also, we have SaaS offerings like Quality Center hosted in the cloud, and we're seeing huge growth with people either doing their test management like Quality Center or application lifecycle management, or even performance testing, Performance Center in the cloud. So there's lots of different things going on, from hosting test environments that can burst to tools managed in the cloud, or even environments managed in the cloud. So lots of different things there.
No, absolutely, and I want to add one more point on the environments, as you rightly sort of pointed out, that there is an increased budget allocation for spending on hardware and licenses. So which means for license providers, it's a good news. But at the same time, they're expecting service providers to bring the necessary expertise. And we have a specific question related to the labor budget increase versus hardware and license budget increase. And we found that our users are telling us that there is more money being allocated to the test environment and licenses compared to the labor budget. So this is going to be an important area where more consolidation is expected. Again, riding on the trend that we saw from the centralization perspective. And second, in terms of implementing more and more optimization so that every license and every tool that is deployed is used to the maximum by users is going to be ensured. So another way to look at it is significant expertise is really required to deploy this rightly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, I was out at a customer the other day, and I think they said 46% of their defects were actually caused by environment or test data issues. And you know, it's not always throwing hardware at it. You know, a lot of times you can use service virtualization and certain technologies, as well as the specialized skills to bring those costs down. I think two of the top problems that we face in QA and testing is test environments and test data. But let's talk about Agile. What a trend! Tell us a little bit about the finding in Agile.
Yeah, and Agile as expected is again growing, and if I were to say that adoption of Agile is relatively higher in the European markets, and another area where Agile is expecting is the role of specialized tester, where more and more subject matter expertise, more and more industry expertise is expected from a testing perspective. And again, a lot of specific methodologies are expected here as well as expertise. So evolution of Agile, I would say, is something very similar to the trends that we see in mobile technology earlier, and they will sort of go hand in hand.
Certainly, and Agile's not really, you know, new. It's been around for a while. It's just that I think major companies are now getting comfortable with it, and it started, in my experience, a lot of it started in small groups and then kind of grew up, and now it's becoming more mainstream. And the challenge now that we're seeing, and this was true where I ran QA before, was there's both agile and non-agile in the same environments, and fitting in releases that have two different cadences can be sometimes challenging. And what we're trying to do at HP is develop a strong enterprise agile methodology to really make agile work for large companies, not just, you know, small startups and so forth. We'll talk about that a little bit more, you know, when we dig into the graphs and charts as well. So let's go ahead and look at some of the research highlights, and let's start by talking about the QA budgets. You mentioned the continued growth, but the shifting priorities. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and you know, I sort of alluded earlier that there are three components that we wanted to really get a little bit more insight in terms of budget. It's first is the human resources, the number of people we're going to deploy for the testing projects, the tools and software licenses spent compared to 12 to 13, and the hardware and infrastructure. And what we found as the investment expected in hardware and infrastructure will lead, followed by testing tools and followed by human resources. And if I compare that percentage budget, which was about 18% in 2012, is coming to about 23% in 2013. And so 23 is very close to 25%. So we're now saying that, and there is a press release that was issued when we launched this jointly on last Friday, saying that quarter of a budget now is really going for software quality and the testing related aspects for every organization that we surveyed.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, a lot of that going to the hardware, and then as HP software, we love the tools part, and the human resources is something that we do jointly together with you guys. So very interesting.
Yeah, and Another additional comment I wanted to make here, Mike, is that if you notice there are 1,191 respondents, so we really extracted this data from people who are decision makers, people who we talk to, who budgets in terms of spending, because we considered that that's going to be the relevant response from trying to compile it from a research perspective. That's why our overall sample size is 1,500 respondents, but when it comes to budgets, we looked at the data from people who are directly managing the budgets.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about the budgets in terms of the proportion of the budgets going to transformational projects.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, and this is more of, if I were to compare 5 reports, I would not be proven wrong, that what we're seeing here is that significant time to market pressure on every business. Which means if you ask the CIO what business really wants, anything which is going to help business transform, it is much easier to allocate budget for that. But on the contrary, if you ask that saying that I want to test more my existing applications, or I want to test more my applications which are mainly keeping the lights on, or more of the maintenance. So we're going to see a significant decline in that. So what we see from 12 to 13 particularly, and 13 to 15 in terms of projection, a maintenance work for a sample size used to be, say, 59% of the budget is going to go down to as low as 51%. But anything that gets allocated to business transformation or any quality around transformational work is going to increase from 41% to 46% in a year, and can go as high as close to 50% as we approach 2015. So very clear trend here. If there is something, keep the lights on, less money. If there is something transformational, time to market driven, we're going to get more money for this.
Let's talk about this transformation of the testing organization. I noticed that there's a huge growth in the testing centers of excellence. We went from 4% in 2011 and 6% in 2012, and had rapid growth to get to 19% this year. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting observation, Mike, and that's a significant jump the way I see from setting up the TCoEs. Now, what we need to really see is a fully operational TCoE with respect to the other questions. And if you look at plan to deploy internally managed TCoE within next 2 years, that percentage is actually coming down from 27, 24 to 23. That means people have taken a year or two to really plan and execute on this particular aspect. So what we will see is there are organizations that are planning today, and we will see the TCO operational percentage continue to jump. And that again supports our analysis and the inference related to the centralization part, because test centers of excellence are nothing but shared services which start to create an enterprise-wide testing function across the business units or within the business unit, as the case may be. So you're absolutely right, significant increase in 13 as against 12. We expect this to further increase in 14 as well as 15. And at the same time, we are finding that there are 26% organizations in 13, they have absolutely no plans, which means those organizations are possibly ready now to start talking about the plans, and they will get operational in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. So centers of excellence focus continues, and that again goes very well with the centralization theme that we have seen earlier.
Yeah, I would agree, and I've had a lot of success personally with testing centers of excellence. The fact that you can standardize, that you can have consistent metrics, consistent methodologies and policies. Some things just make sense, like centralizing automation and performance, where it takes a specialized skill and you need to have career growth for those folks. And whether you're working with a partner or doing it yourself, in a lot of circumstances, testing center of excellence makes a lot of sense. I have seen some companies have they have the name testing center of excellence, but in reality, it's a testing center of mediocrity using industry worst practices, and that's the type of thing you want to avoid. But if done right, a lot of efficiencies can be made by testing center of excellence. So let's look on to the type of metrics. This is an area that I'm particularly passionate about. Is communicating quality at all levels. Tell me about the research findings and kind of what this graph's all about in terms of the metrics and KPIs.
Absolutely, and this is one area, if you look at right from the first code was written and we sort of tested it, we knew that what's the best way to really report it. So number of defects found continues to be at the top of the chart. 73% organizations said that they use this metric at every stage of software development lifecycle, followed by the cost per test case, and which is more related to the effort that is deployed. And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about test centers of excellence that if there is a more drive towards automation, you're going to find that the cost per test case should decrease, right?
True.
So that's the second metric everybody is going to really try. Now there is another one which is interesting here, which is the last one, which is number of defects not found. And this is interesting because earlier, as you mentioned, whether it is data, whether it is environment, whether it is requirement clarity, or whether it is coding, there are many ways why defects really creep in. Sometimes you observe what are the defects found, that is 73%, but not found. To really track it is an interesting trend. Again, 33% of the respondents said that they want to really find that out,
Absolutely. Like I said, this is an area that I've done a lot of work in, and the number of defects found is only important as it is relative to something else. I like to see the pre-production versus post-production defects, or the defects found by the customers or by UAT rather than by the test team. And in terms of costs, sometimes the real costs are underestimated in terms of a defect may cost a certain amount because you're paying a tester this much, and you pay a certain amount for the reviews and for the tools and so forth and the environments, and you can get a cost that way. But the cost, if a defect isn't found, is increased calls to care, customer churn or loss of customers, could be revenue leakage, or it could even be damage to the brand, potential lawsuits, and those costs can be in the millions and billions, and a lot of times that's underestimated. So, the closer we can get to the true total cost of quality, I think the more value QA and testing will have to the business.
Yeah, and I have a follow-on comment here, Mike, related to the left shift that we talked earlier.
Yep.
That the earlier you track a defect, I'm sure you heard this, that the requirement phase, if you track a defect, it might be fixed with $150, but the moment that gets into production, it might require $15,000.
Absolutely.
So what is really in play here is 100 times what you need to really watch at what stage are we really tracking the defect.
Absolutely, yeah. One of my favorite quotes is by Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, who said, I could fix it on the drafting board with an eraser on a pencil, or I can fix it in the construction site with a jackhammer. Which do you think is less expensive? So
that's a great analogy. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about mobile testing. This is huge. Recently, I read in one of the Gartner reports that 4 times the applications are built on mobile than they are for the web or other other ways. So mobile applications are obviously just exploding. So tell us about this shift from tools to methods.
Yeah, and I talked about 3 things that our users are telling us is consistent methods, access to devices, and expertise. But here is more industry or the sector-wise trend that we are seeing. And if you look at public sector, That's sort of leading it 27% to 58%. Significant increase in telecom as well, followed by financial services and everyone else. And this is a significant jump compared to last year, and we expect this to continue going forward in terms of 14 and 15.
Absolutely, and it looks like the healthcare and life sciences are really leading the way too in that area.
Yes, they are. They are.
Yeah.
And again, the mobile adoption, if you look at it, whether it is business to consumer, it is business to employee, in every category, more and more applications are sort of getting mobile, and hence there is so much growth in terms of the testing of those applications.
Absolutely. All right, very interesting. Let's move on and talk more about agile development environment and some of the findings there. Tell us about what the executives are saying about the agile testing approach.
Yeah, and here, important data point, Mike, that 64% of the executives say that lack of an adequate agile testing approach is a major concern. And that's being the very nature of the agile process, I must say. And 49% of them say that they are difficulty in identifying where to really focus their testing efforts during the agile life cycle. And 39% say the tools to create reusable tool sets. And this again may be the fact because of the rapid development deployment type of a nature compared to the waterfall, but I think this is consistent with what we are seeing. From my earlier comment that I made, that increased expectation of the industry capability or domain capability and tool capability expected in the agile environment compared to the traditional testing environment, clearly.
True, very true. This is an area, like I said, that HP is investing in quite a bit in R&D. We've recently rolled out the Agile Manager tool, which allows you to do agile project management, and it synchronizes very well with Quality Center and ALM. And actually, at HP, we use this internally, and I log in every day, and you know, we've got our sprints, and we've got the burn down charts, and the task board, and storyboard view, and really everything you could expect from agile development and project management tool. I've found it very easy to use and helps us keep track of our progress very well. So and one of the reasons why we've been investing so heavily is because of the findings over the years of the growth of agile. So this report has helped us with our investments as well. So let's talk a little bit more about test infrastructure. We mentioned it earlier, but let's get into some of the numbers.
Yeah, and test infrastructure, we sort of studied it along with the data management because big data is a word which we hear possibly in every conversation that goes around in terms of information technology, and so much data is getting generated by every minute or the second that really goes by. So what we're really finding is 67% of the respondents said, again, lack of availability or right tools for testing in terms of the data management. And that comes from the fact that how do you really create the right test environment from separating the test data versus the production data? How do you really make sure that the personally identifiable information is protected? And every industry, healthcare or financial services or telecom, has this concern to make sure that there is a right identification of a data masking or data scrubbing to be used. And that's why test infrastructure and test data management is going to be an important area where clients are going to invest more in terms of testing.
Very, very true. You know, as I mentioned earlier, there's this trend also towards service virtualization. Do you see that as a trend that you're seeing with your clients as well? Is virtualizing services where, let's say, third parties aren't available for testing, like shipping or you know, different types of services, or you know, the test environments aren't available, so you create virtual services in terms of making test environments ready when they haven't even been built out yet. Have you seen this trend yet?
Absolutely, Mike. Completely agree.
Okay, great. Okay, well, let's dig into the recommendations. One of the things I like about the World Quality Report is the fact that it doesn't just leave you with graphs and charts to figure it out on your own. There are some concrete recommendations. So why don't you walk us through the recommendations and we'll wrap it up.
Absolutely. Very consistent with our earlier analysis of the data. The first one is that create an environment by which you will be able to report more business-oriented metrics. That's our first recommendation. The second, optimize the QA operations. Take advantage of centralization. And it's much easier to create a business case for return on investment once you have a centralized organization that is really taking care of all tools, methodologies, processes, and people competency that is really required here. Big focus on mobile. Again, look for three things: is consistency, methods, expertise, and access to your devices. When you really look for anybody in terms of mobile testing, whether you're doing it internally or whether you're really looking at hiring somebody from external service providers to really help you. Use of clouds for testing, yes, found more in the still front office applications. Legacy is going to get relatively ready, so keep your plans for 2013 in terms of what you are ready to really deploy in cloud. Clearly establish the environment and the data management practices which are in line with your industry, because each of them are very specific to the industry that you really bring. And it is important now to really integrate testing in every part of the agile process of the agile development projects that we really see. So very much in line with recommendations what we see for what 1,500 respondents told us about what's the state of quality in their organization is, and what we summarily believe what the state of quality today is for 2013, and can give us some inferences which can help us for our right decision making for 13 as well as beyond, Mike.
Well, fantastic. Great recommendations. And thank you all for listening to this EuroSTAR Online Software Testing Summit presentation on behalf of HP and Capgemini and Sojeti. Thank you again. If you would like to find out more information, you can go to www.worldqualityreport.com and you can actually download the full report there. Or you can go to www.hp.com/go/Capgemini for more information. And you can follow the EuroSTAR on Twitter, or you can follow me at QA Cooper on Twitter. Mac, any final words?
No, thank you very much. Happy to take any follow-on questions if anybody would like to know more from me. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.